20. Gail Cradle. Just days after ringing in the new year in 2020, a 22-year-old Colorado woman named Gail Cradle turned herself into the Eagle County Sheriff's Office after learning that she was wanted on suspicion of vandalizing an ice sculpture along the Gore Creek Promenade in Vail. Surveillance footage appeared to show Cradle repeatedly kicking the sculpture until it fell over, effectively destroying the work of art and causing an estimated $2,000 worth of damages. The suspect then fled the scene on foot. 2 other women could be seen in the video, and while neither participated in the senseless act of vandalism, one of them appeared to film the act of vandalism with a cell phone. Shortly after the footage was released, members of the public came forward and helped identify Cradle as the suspect. Authorities issued a warrant for her arrest for felony criminal mischief, and she promptly surrendered to law enforcement. Based on the results of a quick Google search, it appears as though Cradle is currently working as a wellness practitioner and yoga instructor. 19. Sierra Booker. In early 2024, a Tennessee woman named Sierra Simone Booker was booked on a vandalism charge. It was the very next day after celebrating her 30th birthday. According to Scoop Nashville, she was accused of throwing her boyfriend's belongings in a dumpster during an argument. The alleged victim, Tristan Allen, called the police to assist in the retrieval of his property from Booker's apartment. Understandably, he wanted his iPhone, wallet, medication, and work uniform back. Booker allegedly let Allen and a police officer inside, but revealed that she had tossed the items into a dumpster nearby, and that it was too late to recover them. Upon learning that the belongings were irretrievable, the officer arrested Booker on suspicion of vandalism. Records show that Booker has been arrested several times in the past, including in 2017 for allegedly driving with a suspended license. In August 2023, she was booked into custody on suspicion of public intoxication, disorderly conduct, child endangerment, vandalism, DUI, making a false report, and a weapon-related charge. And the outcome of her current case remains to be seen. It's probably a good idea for Booker to avoid any further contact with law enforcement in the near future. 18. Abigail Fuka and Madison Brown. In October 2023, 2 students from the University of Mississippi were accused of damaging a newly installed public fountain at a park next to Oxford City Hall. The suspects, 19-year-old Abigail Fuka from Virginia Beach, Virginia, and 18-year-old Madison Brown from Davidson, North Carolina, were charged with felony malicious mischief for allegedly causing an estimated $4,700 worth of damage to the fountain. According to law enforcement, the suspects damaged both the structure and the actual plumbing, and the act of vandalism was captured on surveillance footage. The fountain had recently been installed at the City Hall Pocket Park thanks to a donation from a local Rotary Club. Authorities accused Fuka and Brown of rolling a sphere off the fountain's platform, resulting in the aforementioned damage. The current status of the case is unclear. 17. Kenneth Hoyle and Bobby Depal. At first, 69-year-old Kenny Hoyle and his wife got along with Bobby Depal and August Dempsey, a 40-something couple who lived next door to them in Philadelphia's Frankfurt neighborhood. But their neighborly relationship went down the tubes when Bobby built a large shed on his small property without the proper permit. Kenny reported him for it, and the city fined Bobby and ordered him to dismantle the shed. Bobby, a recovering alcoholic, fought the case in court. Outside the courtroom, he had an explosive outburst and threatened to kill Hoyle, only to act perfectly pleasant the next day, as if nothing had happened. In hindsight, this was one major sign that Bobby had fallen off the wagon. Much to Kenny's disdain, Bobby won his appeal to keep his shed. Outraged by the court's decision, Kenny made it a habit to call the cops on Bobby's household over even the most trivial matters. Consequently, the confrontations between the two men became even more heated. and everyone involved in the rivalry became miserable as the intensifying war took over their lives. Kenny accused Bobby of throwing a cinder block through his car window, dumping a bucket full of maggots on his porch, and fatally poisoning his dog. Bobby adamantly denied killing his neighbor's dog, but he didn't go out of his way to hide the fact that he was doing whatever he could to try getting Kenny to move. He blared music, shined bright lights into Kenny's home, and ruined Kenny's fence in a booze-fueled campaign of destruction. Kenny called the police during one of these instances, but they were unable to rush to the scene because they were dealing with another serious crime. In the early hours of the morning, he dialed 911 again and told the dispatcher that he shot and killed Bobby and August. He initially tried claiming that he acted in self-defense, but surveillance footage showed that the couple was unarmed when he opened fire on them. The senior citizen was found guilty of murdering the pair and received a 66-year prison sentence. 16. John Leonard Orr. During his time working as an arson investigator for the Glendale Fire Department in Southern California, John Leonard Orr was highly respected in the Los Angeles area. That's because nobody knew that he was a serial arsonist. And while he paraded around as a pillar of his community between 1984 and 1991, he set as many as 2,000 fires. One of Orr's earliest fires tore through an entire hardware store in less than 5 minutes, leaving 4 people dead. Of course, nobody would have imagined that Orr was the culprit. But as the fires continued over the years, investigators began to suspect that he wasn't the upstanding local official he painted himself out as. Law enforcement eventually put him under surveillance, and they finally arrested him in 1991 after connecting him to several arsons. While searching Orr's house, detectives found a 350-page manuscript about an arsonist who set buildings on fire in the same area and under the same circumstances as many of the real-life fires that Orr was the prime suspect in. The similarities were so uncanny that it read like a confession, and it even served as a guide that helped investigators uncover the full extent of Orr's crimes. Orr insisted that the manuscript was a fictional work based on investigations he had led throughout his career, but the parallels were impossible to ignore. By the time he went to trial in state court for 4 counts of murder in connection with the 1984 hardware store fire, he was already serving time in federal prison for 6 arson convictions. He was found guilty of all 4 murder charges, plus 20 additional counts of arson, and was sentenced to life in prison. 15. Jaclyn Alexandra Rivera. When someone suspects their partner of cheating, it can cause them to act irrational and drive them to do things they wouldn't normally do. And it's understandable, to a point. But one Northern California woman took her behavior to such an extreme that nobody could overlook her actions. Back in 2012, 18-year-old Jaclyn Alexandra Rivera began to suspect that her 21-year-old boyfriend was being unfaithful. Hoping to get to the bottom of the situation, she went to the man's home in San Mateo and tried to have a civilized discussion about her suspicions. But Jaclyn's boyfriend wasn't in the mood to talk, at which point all rational thought went out the window. Instead of simply leaving and moving on with her life, which would have perhaps been the logical thing to do, Rivera left, only to return at around 3 o'clock in the morning. She snuck into the man's bedroom, lit his bed on fire, and slipped away from the scene. The victim's father awoke to the sound of his son's anguished screams and rushed into the room, where he found the victim essentially being burned alive. He squelched the flames with a garden hose, quite possibly saving his son's life. It was a serious situation, with the victim suffering burns to his arms and legs, yet nobody called the police that morning. Law enforcement learned about the incident weeks later, when Rivera's friend told the police that Rivera had confessed to committing the crime. The same person also told the victim that Rivera had admitted to being responsible for the arson. Rivera was found mentally unfit to stand trial, but this didn't get her off the hook for her crimes. After spending 2 years in a psychiatric facility until her mental health was deemed restored, she pleaded no contest in exchange for a maximum prison sentence of 5 years. 14. Justin James Luddington. People are known to go to crazy extremes to get rid of a neighbor they don't enjoy living near. Sometimes they'll try to harass the household into moving, or they'll even go as far as murdering their rival. And in some cases, they'll burn the family's house down. In late 2021, police in Lake Okeechobee, Florida, responded to a call about a house fire. By the time responding officers arrived, the residence was fully engulfed in flames as firefighters fought to extinguish the blaze. The homeowner had carried her disabled mother-in-law outside. They were the only ones home at the time, and thankfully they both survived. But the household and everything in it were destroyed, along with the family's 2 vehicles. Witnesses reported seeing the neighbor, Justin James Luddington, hitting the home with a hammer and threatening to burn it down. The 2 parties had reportedly been entangled in a long-standing dispute when Luddington allegedly set some wood pallets on fire and calmly walked away while saying, "Let it burn." The details of the rivalry between Luddington and the victims are unclear, but the suspect turned himself in to the sheriff after learning that he was wanted in connection with the crime. He was charged with first-degree arson of an occupied structure and 2 counts of second-degree arson of a vehicle. According to the most recent available updates on the case, he was being held on $70,000 bond while awaiting the outcome of the case. 13. Hilda Nordwick. In a disturbing act of revenge that enraged animal rights activists across the United States, 30-year-old Hilda Jasenia Nordwick allegedly threw a brick through her ex's window and strangled his dog to death in 2018. The victim, 27-year-old Robert Miller, arrived home to find his window shattered, his screen door ripped off its hinges, his mailbox smashed, and his canine companion dead. For nearly a year, investigators failed to tie the evidence at the scene to a suspect. Finally, in 2019, they arrested Nordwick after identifying her as the alleged culprit using surveillance footage and license plate detection technology. Prosecutors accused Nordwick of damaging Miller's home and killing his dog in a jealous rage after he ended their romantic relationship. In 2021, Nordwick pleaded no contest to theft, animal cruelty, and burglary. She was sentenced to a month in jail, followed by 2 years of probation. While handing down the punishment, the judge issued a stern warning that if Nordwick violated the terms of her probation, she would automatically be sentenced to 13 months in prison for burglary, plus a year in county lockup for animal cruelty. 12. Henry Vincent. 78-year-old Richard Osborne Brooks and his wife were fast asleep one night in 2018 when they were awakened by 2 burglars. One of the intruders, who was later identified as 37-year-old career criminal Henry Vincent, forced Richard into the kitchen while his accomplice ransacked the southeast London home. The pensioner fiercely defended himself and stabbed Vincent in the chest. As he fled the scene on foot, the thief collapsed and died from his injuries. Police initially arrested Osborne Brooks on suspicion of murder, but cleared him of any wrongdoing a few days later after concluding that he stabbed Vincent in self-defense. Unfortunately, having the case dropped only eliminated some of the problems that the robbery brought into Richard's life. Henry Vincent was a well-known member of a traveling criminal gang notorious for seeking revenge against its enemies. Members of the tight-knit group had already posted threats against Richard on social media, and while neighbors were relieved about his exoneration, they remained worried for his safety. One concerned community member told the Daily Mail that Vincent's clan had a reputation for making good on its violent threats, and that Richard and his wife may never be able to return to their home, where members of the group had set up memorial shrines on the sidewalk. At the time, the couple was staying at an undisclosed location. Nearly a year later, the Sun reported that there was still a price on Richard's head, and that Vincent's associates were still intent on getting revenge. They reportedly didn't care whether or not the stabbing was carried out in self-defense. 11. Christina boffing cell. An Indiana man's heart was destroyed in September 2023 when he discovered that his childhood home in Hancock County had been destroyed in a fire. In addition to burning the house to the point where it was practically unrecognizable, the blaze killed 10 of Tony Sell's dogs. The monetary damages alone were estimated at $55,000. Just days earlier, police had been called to the home in response to a report about a shed that was on fire. At the property, they came in contact with Tony's estranged wife of 6 years, Christina boffing Cell, who reportedly refused to allow law enforcement to conduct a thorough arson investigation. Suspecting the fires had been set deliberately, law enforcement launched an investigation after the second blaze tore through Tony's home. Several weeks after the devastating incident, they arrested Christina on suspicion of arson. Speaking with local station 21 Alive News in early 2024, Tony described Christina as very abusive, both mentally and physically. He added that the police were never at the home throughout his childhood, but that his visits from the cops became the norm after he and Christina got married due to frequent domestic disputes. Christina faces several counts of arson as well as an animal cruelty charge. The case is ongoing. 10. Dominic Baran. 25-year-old Dominic Baran of Manchester, England, portrayed himself as a devout Christian, but in reality, he used religion as a way to control his girlfriend. The couple had a tumultuous on and off relationship, which ended for good in 2018 when the young woman became fed up with Dominic's controlling ways and his drug abuse. A fight between the pair had gotten physical, leaving the woman physically injured and scared for her safety. When Dominic stewed over the relationship ending, the ex-girlfriend left her apartment and went to stay with her mother. Unwilling to accept that it was really over, Dominic continued to contact the woman and even broke into her house when she wasn't there. While snooping through her belongings, he discovered evidence that she had recently gotten intimate with another man. It was enough to send Dominic into an unchecked rage, and he set the residence on fire. By the time firefighters arrived, the home had sustained major damage. Upon learning that he was wanted in connection with the arson, Dominic turned himself into the police. He initially denied any wrongdoing, but eventually admitted to the crime. His lawyer told the court that Baran had limited experience with relationships and that he suffered from a multitude of lifelong family and emotional issues. But it was no excuse for terrorizing his ex, destroying her belongings, and nearly burning her house down. And prosecutors remained determined to see the case through. Baran eventually pleaded guilty to assault and arson and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. 9. Virginia Kelly. As the president of the California-based nonprofit Latino Foster Parent Association, 73-year-old Virginia Kelly was tasked with distributing toys and clothing that were donated to the organization, courtesy of Toys for Tots and other charities. In 2008, a foster parent contacted police with suspicions that not all of the toys were ending up in needy hands, after she was unable to get any donations from the nonprofit. During a raid of Kelly's San Isidro home, police found 2 locked bedrooms chock full of merchandise. They also found stashes at her daughter's house and in a storage unit, amounting to around 11,000 stolen items with an estimated value of around $200,000. Kelly was charged with grand theft. Her lawyer argued that the organization she ran had received more toys than she knew what to do with, and that she never stole anything. He pointed out that the investigation into Kelly stemmed from false allegations that she sold the toys for profit and that her history of helping families and children essentially speaks for itself. Prosecutors, on the other hand, allege that Kelly planned to sell the toys and keep the cash, and that her actions harmed plenty of vulnerable people. They accused her of taking advantage of the community for years and described her actions as despicable. 8. Dean Keller versus Jeffrey Wagle. Indianapolis firefighter Dean Keller and his wife had been living in their Greenwood, Indiana home for years when Jeffrey Wagle moved in next door. The two men got along fine at first, but that all changed one day in 2009. Keller was outside training the family's new puppy when Wagle accused him of being on his property. Wagle also seemed strangely bothered to learn that Keller was a military veteran. At least 15 police reports were filed between both parties over the next 8 years as the tensions between them continued to escalate. On one occasion, the Kellers accused Wagle of luring their dogs into his yard and threatening to kill them. Following another incident, Wagle claimed that the Keller's dog had run into his yard and bitten him. The ongoing feud came to blows when Wagle allegedly threatened the Keller's dog with a knife. Wagle and Keller wrestled each other to the ground as Keller tried fighting the knife out of Wagle's hand. Both men were arrested for battery, but the charges were later dropped. The verbal confrontations continued and often came with threats of violence and actual violence from Wagle. He allegedly threw firecrackers at the Keller's dogs, spat on Dean Keller, swung a baseball bat at him, stabbed him with a fork, and more. Concerned for his family's safety, Keller installed a security camera facing Wagle's property. The long-standing feud reached a boiling point in 2017 when the two men exchanged words from across the fence that separated their yards. Wagle pulled a gun. Before he could shoot, Keller pulled his own gun out and fired 11 rounds. Jeff was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, but survived. Police determined that Keller acted in self-defense and arrested Wagle. He pled guilty to criminal recklessness and was sentenced to time served. The police were called one more time after that, but it appears as though the neighbors have finally learned to leave each other alone. 7. David Crawford. Over a decades-long period, starting in the early 2000s, a serial arsonist set nearly a dozen houses on fire across 6 Maryland counties. Several of the fires were started when people were fast asleep in the middle of the night, and multiple families lost their homes and/or vehicles. Miraculously, everyone who was targeted in the years-long crime spree escaped uninjured. It took law enforcement nearly 20 years to even realize that the fires were connected. They finally realized that a serial arsonist was at play after discovering evidence that pointed them in the direction of one suspect: former Laurel Police Chief David Crawford, who had retired back in 2010. In one way or another, all the victims, including former colleagues, a chiropractor, and even Crawford's stepson, had a history of disagreements with the suspect. Evidence at the crime scenes showed a repeated pattern of the culprit using gasoline as an accelerant, and at least one of the crimes was captured on home surveillance footage. While searching Crawford's home in 2021, investigators found evidence further connecting him to the crimes, including a list of targets. And while they were able to connect Crawford to the crime using forensic evidence, his grudges against the victims proved to be the big break in the case that led to the rest of the discoveries pointing toward his possible guilt. The accused serial arsonist was finally arrested in March of 2021. He was charged with 58 counts in 4 different counties, including Prince George's County, Montgomery County, Frederick County, and Howard County. Following a months-long trial in early 2023, a Howard County jury convicted Crawford of 8 counts of attempted first-degree murder, 3 counts of arson, and 1 count of malicious burning in connection with 3 separate arsons. He received 8 life sentences, 6 of which are to be served concurrently, plus 75 years behind bars. As long as the conviction and sentences stand, the 71-year-old will never be released from prison. Crawford has maintained his innocence throughout the case and continues to do so as he awaits trial in various other counties. He plans to appeal his conviction despite facing at least 4 more attempted murder charges and at least 3 counts of first-degree arson. 6. The Ninja Thief. From 2009 to 2017, a master thief committed over 250 burglaries in the Japanese port city of Osaka. Surveillance footage always showed the thief dressed in all black, like a ninja, as he moved stealthily across rooftops and carried out his crimes with cat-like coordination. Over the years, the so-called Heisei Ninja made off with an estimated $260,000 worth of stolen money and valuables. Police finally got a break after 8 years when the ninja burglar appeared on camera without his face covered for the first time. Law enforcement put the suspect under surveillance until they had enough evidence to charge him. The public was shocked when news broke out that the legendary criminal was an unemployed old man. While following the man, who was later identified as 74-year-old Mitsuaki Tanigawa, detectives saw that he had a very consistent routine and habits. He left his home every day looking like an ordinary elderly civilian and went to an abandoned apartment building where he transformed into the nighttime version of himself. Tanigawa waited until nightfall and then left under the cover of darkness, as if he was going to a normal third-shift job. When police asked the suspect why he turned to crime, he allegedly said that he simply hated working. He blamed his age for his arrest, stating, "If I were younger, I wouldn't have been caught. I'll quit now as I'm 74 and old enough." 5. Glitter Payback. If you've ever had to clean up glitter, then you know it takes forever, and that it's nearly impossible to get every little piece. An unsuspecting Florida man learned this lesson the hard way in early 2023, when a pair of women approached him while he was standing on the balcony of his Clearwater home and tossed a bucket full of glitter right at him. Later identified as 29-year-olds Sarah Franks and Caitlin O'Donovan, the women proceeded to climb over the balcony railing and entered the home, where they allegedly doused the interior with sparkles. They then fled the scene, with Franks stopping to kick out a window on their way out. Police tracked down the suspects at a nearby address. They noticed that Frank's car was warm to the touch and saw glitter inside. Authorities charged Franks and O'Donovan with felony burglary, and Franks caught a criminal mischief charge for kicking the victim's window in. The suspects bonded out for $75,000, and the charges were ultimately dropped. Franks told the Smoking Gun that she and O'Donovan were married, and that they had both had a casual relationship with the glitter attack victim. Their three-way fling was no longer going on when the glitter incident occurred. But Franks didn't go into further detail about what went so wrong that she and O'Donovan were inspired to dump glitter all over the man's apartment. 4. Kaye Medina. A 61-year-old Texas man was reduced to crawling out of his house and yelling for help during the early morning hours in November 2023, after a woman he met on a sugar daddy dating website allegedly attacked him. According to the Bexar County Sheriff's Department, the victim connected with 26-year-old Kaylee Renee Medina through a platform called Seeking. Formerly known as Seeking Arrangement, the website was designed to help wealthy, and often married, benefactors and cash-hungry, attractive singles find each other while being upfront and honest about their circumstances and demands. After meeting with Medina for dinner, the man decided he wasn't interested in seeing her again, but he stayed in touch with her over text message. He would later tell police that she randomly showed up at his house at 2:30 in the morning and that he let her in. According to law enforcement, Medina suddenly asked for $2,000 in cash. When the victim said he didn't have that kind of money, she allegedly freaked out and trashed his home, destroying his TV, entertainment center, a painting, and an entertainment system. Several walls were also damaged during the tirade. The man said that when he told Medina to stop destroying his home, she poured laundry detergent over his head. Blinded by the chemicals, he crawled outside and yelled until someone called for help. He was treated at the hospital for the burns to his eyes and the lacerations to his legs. Medina is further accused of fleeing the scene with the victim's passport, iPhone, security camera, and a blow dryer. She was charged with robbery and released on a $20,000 bond. Shortly after the initial charge was announced, she was picked up on a DWI warrant and was additionally charged with continuous family violence due to an alleged pattern of aggressive behavior in domestic settings. During a press conference, Bexar County Sheriff Javier Salazar described Medina as no stranger to the law, with 3 DWIs on her rap sheet and several past arrests for assault and aggravated assault. 3. Pete Richter. Mark and Diane Zander were hoping to befriend their new neighbors, Pete and Barbara Richter. Pete was a recently retired cop from Baltimore who had built a home in Stevensville, Maryland for him and Barbara to start the next chapter of their lives in. The couple were outside one day when Mark and Diane Zander introduced themselves, and at first it seemed like everyone was going to get along fine. But someone vandalized the Richters' home before they even moved in, causing $20,000 worth of damage. When Pete heard that Mark and another resident had been peering in through his windows, he became convinced that Mark had committed the crime, even though there was no evidence to suggest that this was true, and despite the fact that no arrests were made. Determined to get along with their new neighbors, the Zanders chalked the incident up to a misunderstanding and vowed not to hold a grudge against Pete. But Pete clung to his anger and made enemies with the Zanders and various other neighbors, often complaining about trivial disturbances that members of the community typically tolerated, like loud music, teenagers playing sports and riding ATVs, and a truck driver who parked his 18-wheeler along the street on the weekends. In 2001, the Zanders' house mysteriously burned down. Investigators were unable to determine the origins or cause of the fire, but given the hostilities between the Richters and the rest of the neighborhood, the Zanders believed Pete was responsible. But they loved their community too much to move away and rebuild their house, even though other neighbors were starting to leave due to the Richters' behavior. From start to finish, the animosity went on for over 14 years. It finally came to an end one day when Pete lured the Zanders' dog into his yard and accused Mark of trespassing when he went to retrieve his pet. Mark was trying to leave when Pete pulled a gun and fired 2 bullets into his back, giving him no chance to defend himself. Pete claimed that he shot Mark in self-defense, but a jury convicted him of second-degree murder, and the judge sentenced him to 25 years behind bars. 2. Jake Belota. When 22-year-old Jake Belota's PlayStation console disappeared in 2016, he was quick to accuse his former roommate, 24-year-old Joshua Barnes, of stealing it. Barnes had recently been evicted from their shared apartment in Maitland, Florida for failing to pay rent, and Belota became convinced that he must have been the culprit who broke into the unit and made off with the PlayStation, along with a bong and a marijuana scale. A third roommate who is still living at the residence, Ian McClurg, would later tell law enforcement that Belota was beyond pissed. McClurg would also accuse Belota of being so enraged at Barnes that he punched a hole in the wall. When Belota heard that Barnes was bragging to people about the PlayStation theft, his anger became even more explosive. He also started to worry that his former roomie's bragging would make his apartment an attractive target for other burglars. Determined to get his PlayStation back and to get revenge on Barnes, Belota devised a plan to lure his ex-roommate to the apartment under the guise of attending an event together. To sweeten the deal, he claimed there would be attractive women at the gathering. But when Barnes arrived at the residence, there were no hot babes waiting, just Belota with a knife in his hand. Belota stabbed Barnes to death while McClurg watched. Belota and McClurg planned to wrap Barnes' body in garbage bags and remove it from the apartment. But their new roommate unexpectedly arrived home and dialed 911 after discovering the carnage inside. During the call, the roommate told the emergency dispatcher that there was a history of problems between the suspects and the victim, but that he didn't know exactly what had happened because he had just walked in the door. When the dispatcher asked the young man how he knew Barnes was dead, he said that the victim was laying on top of a plastic bag and not moving. He also said that he was afraid that the suspects would do something to harm him and his girlfriend, since they were aware of the crime. Thankfully, officers apprehended Belota and McClurg before anyone else could get hurt. Belota claimed that he killed Barnes in self-defense, but his story didn't hold up in court. He was convicted of murder and was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. McClurg pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact and tampering with evidence, and received a 10-year prison sentence. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Pamela Crawley West. In what can only be described as the devastating end to a truly dysfunctional rivalry between households, a 54-year-old woman named Pamela Crawley West was accused of setting her wheelchair-bound neighbor's house on fire in late 2022. 7 people were inside the Memphis, Tennessee home when it was set ablaze. Thankfully, they all survived. One of the victims claimed that the dispute began when West brought her a takeout hamburger. She said she paid West back for the burger, but fell a little short of the full price. And since the burger was only $2.50 to begin with, it didn't seem like a big deal. But West was outraged. Before leaving and slamming the door behind her, she allegedly said, "Good luck getting out of the house." According to court documents, West set a bag of clothing on the victim's porch and lit it on fire. It took just moments for flames to start engulfing the entire house, and West was charged with aggravated arson. Speaking with Fox 13, the suspect's daughter, Jennifer Johnson, accused the neighbors of being on drugs. She admitted that her mother likes to steal, that she probably stole the neighbor's dope, and that it probably led to the argument that occurred before the fire. But Johnson said that she didn't think West was guilty of arson because she knew there were kids in the house and would never hurt a child. The case appears to be ongoing, but it isn't Crawley's first brush with the law. Records show that she has a lengthy history of arrests, dating at least as far back as 2002, with past charges including disorderly conduct, driving with a suspended license, criminal trespass, theft, criminal impersonation, aggravated robbery, drug possession, public intoxication, possession of contraband while in jail, multiple counts of prostitution, and more.
8. Fatal prank. In a tragic incident that unfolded in February 2021 in Nashville, a seemingly harmless prank took a deadly turn, leaving a 20-year-old man dead. Timothy Wilkes and a friend hatched a plan that was straight out of a criminal's playbook. They decided to stage a fake robbery outside a family trampoline park in Nashville, all in the name of creating viral content for their YouTube channel. Armed with large knives, the duo approached a group of unsuspecting people in what they believed was a hilarious prank. But little did they know that their ill-conceived joke would have dire consequences. As they brandished their knives, a 23-year-old man from the group, fearing for his safety, pulled out a real weapon and shot Timothy Wilkes, who fell victim to the tragic misunderstanding. It's a chilling reminder of how quickly things can spiral out of control when pranks cross the line into dangerous territory. In this case, the shooter claimed self-defense, asserting that he had no idea that this was just a staged prank. Wilkes' friend, who was also part of the ill-fated scheme, later confessed to the police that their intention was to create content for a YouTube video. The incident occurred late in the evening, with families enjoying their time inside the Urban Air Trampoline and Adventure Park, a place that's described as kid-friendly. And while prank videos have been a staple of YouTube content for years, the platform took a stand against dangerous and threatening pranks. YouTube implemented strict rules, including those that could induce fear of imminent physical danger or emotional distress, especially in minors. Threats involving weapons and fake robberies were also explicitly prohibited, with videos violating these guidelines at risk of being taken down. 7. Retired boxer. A 72-year-old retired boxer named Frank Corti faced off against a knife-wielding intruder, leaving the would-be burglar regretting his choices in June 2009. The incident occurred in Bodley, Oxford, as an end to a long-running feud between neighbors. Corti, a former junior boxing champion, had endured months of noisy disturbances from his neighbor, Gregory McCallium, who was notorious for late-night parties. When the police intervened after a noise complaint, McCallium assumed Corti was behind it, sparking a dangerous chain of events. On that fateful morning, McCallium, fueled by intoxication, decided to take matters into his own hands. Armed with a fearsome knife resembling a six-bladed knuckle duster, he attacked Corti's home at 8 a.m. But Corti, who was quick on his feet, dodged the attack and delivered 2 powerful right hooks, leaving McCallium looking like he'd been in a car accident. In a gripping courtroom account, Corti described the intense struggle that followed. He managed to pin McCallium against the wall and called the police, but when the intruder wouldn't drop the knife, Corti unleashed another punch, stunning McCallium. They wrestled and fell to the floor, forcing Corti to use his boxing skills once more to subdue the intruder. In the end, the jury found McCallium guilty of aggravated burglary, and he was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. The judge noted that Corti, being an able-bodied 72-year-old, had every right to protect himself. Corti even said that he'd do it all again if he had to. 6. Wrong driveway. In the quiet rural town of Hebron, upstate New York, something terrible happened in 2023, reminding us all that life can change in an instant even when mistakes are innocent. A group of 4 young adults found themselves in a dire situation when they took a wrong turn, leading them down the driveway of 65-year-old Kevin Monahan. And that's when what should have been a simple navigation error turned into a nightmare. It was a Saturday night just before 10 p.m. when the group was searching for a friend's house in this remote area where dirt roads crisscross the landscape and internet and cell phone signals are scarce. The realization that they'd entered the wrong driveway prompted them to turn their car around, a mistake anyone could make. But what happened next was beyond imagination. Monahan, the homeowner, emerged from his residence armed with a gun. Then, in a horrifying turn of events, he fired at least 2 shots at their vehicle, one of which struck 20-year-old Kaylin Gillis, a young woman from Schloyerville, New York, who was in the car. The group, now in a state of shock, fled the scene, unable to contact 911 due to the poor cell phone reception. It wasn't until they reached the nearby town of Salem that they could summon help. First responders rushed to the scene, but their efforts to save Kaylin Gillis proved futile. Unfortunately, she tragically lost her life in this senseless incident. Sheriff Jeffrey Murphy described her as an innocent young girl from a good family, adding that there was no apparent reason for Monahan to feel threatened, especially as it appeared the vehicle was leaving at the time of the shooting. The investigation revealed that there'd been no prior interaction between the group and Monahan. They'd only been in his driveway for a brief period before shots rang out. Monahan's response to the situation was perplexing. He initially refused to cooperate with the authorities, prolonging a tense standoff. But after more than an hour of negotiations through 911, Monahan was eventually taken into custody. Monahan's attorney, Kurt Mousett, argued that the situation was more complex than it seemed, with 3 vehicles, including a loud motorcycle, descending his client's long, secluded driveway at a high speed and shining lights into his house late at night. Mousett contended that Monahan had reason to be fearful, emphasizing the need for a thorough examination of witness interviews and forensic evidence before drawing any conclusions. This case happened just recently, so we'll have to wait and see how things turn out in the coming months. 5. Instant karma. In Colombia, in May 2013, a would-be phone thief had an unexpected run-in with a bus that left him both battered and busted. It all started at a bus station in Bogota when a man with a penchant for theft attempted to snatch a woman's phone. But little did he know that karma had a rather dramatic plan in store for him. As he made a run for it, hoping to escape with his ill-gotten prize, a bus stopped him dead in its tracks. The moment was captured by a security camera, making it seem like something out of an action-packed film. In his hurry to leave, the alleged thief found himself on a collision course with the bus. He was sideswiped by the large vehicle, ending up under it in a shocking turn of events. As the dust settled and the initial shock wore off, bystanders, including the very woman he'd attempted to rob, rushed to his aid. Despite the irony of the situation, they displayed compassion and humanity, helping the injured thief. It's a testament to the unpredictable nature of life and the innate desire to help others, even when the circumstances are unusual. The story took yet another twist when the police revealed that this would-be mugger had a history of theft, which likely added a layer of irony to the incident. After receiving treatment for his minor injuries, he found himself on the wrong side of the law, once again facing prosecution. In the end though, the victim got her phone back, and justice didn't stop at the clumsy thief. He apparently had accomplices, and they didn't fare any better, as they were captured by the authorities just a couple of hours after the failed heist. It's almost as if the universe conspired to ensure that these criminals face the consequences of their actions. However, it's unclear what punishment these men received in the aftermath of this incident. 4. Young and Dumb. On a night that could rival any Hollywood action movie, two daring teenagers bit off more than they could chew in a 7-Eleven in Gardena, California on December 30th, 2017. Their ill-fated robbery attempt took an unexpected turn when they encountered an armed security guard who wasn't about to let them get away with their crime. At 11:30 p.m., the 7-Eleven silent alarm rang out, summoning deputies from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Compton station to the scene. And what they soon discovered was that this convenience store had its very own guardian, an armed security guard. With a sense of impending trouble, the security guard, stationed in his vehicle, observed two hooded figures entering the store. Their hoods were pulled tightly, as if they were straight out of a heist movie, trying to conceal their identities. And as they leaped over the front counter and rifled through the cashier's pockets, the guard sprang into action. Walking into the store, he witnessed one of the suspects brandishing what appeared to be a black semi-automatic handgun, aiming it at the cashier. Fear for the cashier's life then fueled his response. Without hesitation, he opened fire, striking the armed suspect and the other teenager, who he believed was also armed. The security guard didn't stop there. He bravely detained both teens until the deputies arrived. Both young culprits were later treated for non-life-threatening injuries at a local hospital, but their escapade had serious consequences. It turned out that the gun they brandished was nothing but a replica, and the thieves turned out to be only 16 years old. Justice had its day, as both teens were booked and hit with robbery charges. And with no bail, they found themselves facing the consequences of their ill-conceived scheme. 3. Attack of opportunity. Neil Fools, a man born into a large impoverished family in 1969, began a bizarre and sinister journey that ultimately met a dramatic end in 2015. Growing up in Oregon, Fools displayed an early fascination with firearms and military gear. And after leaving school, he worked low-skilled jobs, but remained law-abiding and refrained from drugs or alcohol. In the 1990s, he moved around the country, eventually settling in Nevada, where he worked as a security guard at Hoover Dam. And that's when his behavior turned deviant, as he abused animals and indulged in the company of prostitutes and pimps. Trouble escalated in 2008 when he faced sexual harassment charges, leading to a series of relocations and run-ins with the law. By 2015, he faced personal struggles with his mother's death and discovering an intimate partner's marriage. This emotional turmoil set the stage for a chilling encounter in West Virginia. Meeting prostitute Heather Saul online, Falls tracked her down and entered her home, holding her at gunpoint. But when Falls set down his gun in order to strangle Saul, she managed to grab the weapon. Saul then turned the tables on her attacker, shooting him dead. Police found a disturbing stash in his car when they arrived, including weapons, bleach, and handcuffs. Falls' dark activities were linked to a series of murders and disappearances of women across multiple states, raising suspicions of a prolific serial killer. A list found in his pocket contained names of potential victims, although they were later confirmed to be alive. Despite his disturbing history and connections to unsolved cases, Falls' true scale of movement and crimes remains a chilling mystery, leaving behind a haunting legacy of violence and terror. 2. Elderly store owner. In the early hours of July 31, 2022, an 80-year-old store owner in Norco, California, proved that age is no obstacle when it comes to defending one's turf. At 2:45 a.m., 4 would-be robbers rolled up to the Norco Market and Liquor in a menacing black BMW SUV, ready to make their move. Surveillance footage captured the tense moments that followed. A masked suspect, dressed in a red and black sweatshirt and wielding a rifle, boldly entered the store. But what he likely didn't anticipate was the resilience of the older gentleman behind the counter. Swift as lightning, the elderly store owner retrieved a shotgun hidden beneath the counter and unleashed a barrage of gunfire in the direction of the intruder. Stunned and rattled, the would-be robber made a hasty retreat, and outside, a second suspect armed with a firearm exited the black SUV. As they scrambled back to their getaway car, shouts of "He shot my arm off" echoed in the night. The tables had turned dramatically. Law enforcement swiftly located the suspects at a Southern California hospital, with one of them nursing a gunshot wound consistent with a shotgun blast. And inside their stolen BMW, a chilling discovery awaited: numerous stolen firearms. The trio of Justin Johnson, Jamar Williams, and Devon Broaders, each aged between 22 and 27, were arrested and booked for robbery and conspiracy, held in lieu of $500,000 bail. The primary suspect, a 23-year-old man who bore the brunt of the elderly store owner's defense, remained hospitalized in critical condition. In a dark twist, though, the store owner, after his courageous act, suffered a heart attack. But luckily he pulled through and is now on the mend. 1. T-Bone Justice. According to a story that was shared by an online user that goes by the name LandB333, karma was looking out for him on a fateful night when he and his wife went out drinking. At an unnamed location, the couple was enjoying themselves at a bar that was owned by one of their friends. Nothing really happened inside the bar though. It was when they left that things really took a turn for the worse. As they were leaving to head home, another patron who had one too many had already gotten behind the wheel of his car. And as his wife went to step into the parking lot, headed for their own vehicle, the drunk patron slammed right into her. The responsible party then got out of his car and tried to make a run for it. But as fate would have it, the bouncer at the front door of the establishment immediately jumped into action. He chased down the drunk driver and managed to beat him into submission. Then he dragged him back to the bar where the bouncer held him until the cops arrived to arrest him. The man who shared this story online claimed that when he thanked the bouncer for his heroic actions, he replied by saying, "Are you kidding? That was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to administer a well-deserved beating." It's not clear how injured the man's wife was after being hit by the car, but she likely made a full recovery given the fact that her husband shared this story on the internet for the whole world to see.
Thanks for watching. Would you rather someone start a fire in your backyard, destroying part of your house, or someone slashing all the tires and breaking all the windows of your car? What would be worse? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.